Imagine a classic multi-level marketing scheme, like instead of convincing your friends to buy, I don't know, overpriced Tupperware or nutritional supplements.
Right, the classic pyramid setup.
Exactly. But instead of Tupperware, the product you are selling is the concept of alpha masculinity itself.
Wow, okay, yeah.
You attract people by flashing these rented sports cars, and you promise them the secret to absolute freedom. But, and here's the catch, the only way you actually pay for that rented car is by charging this ever-growing downstream of insecure recruits, like a monthly fee, to learn how to be exactly like you.
It's a fascinating structure to examine, honestly, because what you're describing is an economic engine built entirely on the conversion of attention into capital.
Exactly.
And in the digital age, I mean, the absolute fastest way to generate that attention is through highly calibrated controversy.
Which brings us to the core mystery for our deep dives today. How exactly did this loosely connected group of internet provocateurs manage to hijack the attention economy?
Yeah, and completely turn the tables on one of the world's most famous documentary filmmakers in the process.
Right. We are looking at a digital subculture that has turned being shamelessly controversial into a multi-million-dollar industry. You've probably heard it referred to as the modern manosphere.
Yeah, the manosphere. And to map out the mechanics, the business models, and the psychology of this space, we are using the 2026 Netflix documentary called Louis Theroux, Inside the Manosphere.
Directed by Adrian Choa, right?
Yep. Directed by Adrian Choa. That's our primary vehicle today. And we have an incredibly robust stack of sources to help you wrap your head around it.
We really do. We're pulling from the foundational background of the documentary's Wikipedia page, for starters.
Plus a really sharp critical review by Lucy Mangan in The Guardian.
Oh, that one is so good. And there's also a highly detailed YouTube video essay by a creator named Cataclysm, plus a bunch of audience reviews from IMDb, just to gauge, how the public actually received this thing.
But before we get into the mechanics of all this, we really need to lay down a very important ground rule for how we are approaching this material today.
Yes, good point.
The sources we're covering deal with some highly debated, highly charged themes. I mean, we are going to be discussing gender roles, modern feminism, and what these creators call red pill philosophy.
Right. And I want to make it unequivocally clear to you listening, neither of us is endorsing, validating, or taking sides on any of the political or gender-based viewpoints mentioned in these texts.
That is a crucial distinction. Our goal today is strictly analytical and journalistic. We are here to impartially report on the content provided in our source stack, period.
Exactly. We're just examining the mechanics of these ideas exactly as they are presented. The how and the why of this digital ecosystem as documented by Theroux and analyzed by critics. We are definitely not here to take a stance on the underlying politics.
So, with that said, let's start by looking at the collision between traditional media and this new digital frontier. Because for decades, Louis Theroux has been the BBC's premier chronicler of the weird, the extreme, the taboo.
Yeah, his whole thing is he'd take his camera crew, travel to a physical compound somewhere in the woods, and just observe.
Right. But this documentary, which dropped globally on Netflix on March 11th, 2026, it represents this massive shift. Theroux himself notes that the manosphere is the modern intersection of everything he has ever studied.
Like the cult-like devotion, the adult content, extreme viewpoints.
Exactly, but it exists entirely online. The evolution of the fringe community is really central to understanding this documentary.
Because it used to be so physical. Like in the 90s or 2000s, if you wanted to observe a radical group, there were geographical boundaries.
You had to literally drive to them.
Yeah. Today, these communities are entirely decentralized.
Yep.
They're united not by a piece of land, but by algorithmic feeds and Discord servers.
And shared ideologies. And one of the foundational ideologies they share is this red pill philosophy.
Wait, let's pause there for a second, because I know that term gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Where exactly does red pill come from, and how are these specific creators defining it?
So the term actually originates from the 1999 sci-fi film The Matrix.
Oh, right. Written and directed by the Wachowskis.
Yep. In the film, the main character, Neo, is offered a choice. He can take the blue pill to remain in a comfortable simulated reality, or take the red pill to wake up and see the harsh, painful truth of the real world.
Which is funny because the Wachowskis have since discussed the film as a transgender allegory.
They have, yeah. But this specific internet subculture has entirely co-opted the metaphor for their own purposes.
So what does it mean to them?
In the manosphere, Taking the red pill basically means waking up to the belief that society, the legal system, and modern dating are fundamentally rigged against men,
Ah, yeah.
and that traditional feminism is essentially a mechanism of control.
Got it. Okay, so Theroux steps into this world that is completely saturated by this philosophy. And almost immediately, he finds that the traditional power dynamic of documentary filmmaking is just broken.
It really is. Historically, the filmmaker holds all the power, right? They have the camera, they control the edit in the cutting room.
But these subjects flip the script entirely. They constantly record the documentary crew right back.
Yeah.
Theroux's presence is immediately monetized and turned into content for their own live streams.
The observer is suddenly the observed.
It's wild. It's a brilliant illustration of how the ecosystem operates. Every single interaction is viewed through the lens of content creation.
Yeah, and the YouTube video essay by Cataclysm points out an exchange Theroux had before filming even officially began, which perfectly encapsulates this dynamic.
Oh, the Andrew Tate thing.
Yes. Theroux reached out to Andrew Tate, who was arguably the most prominent figure associated with this space, to discuss participating in the doc.
And Tate's response was just to mock Theroux's cultural relevance. He basically told him, like, you used to be relevant, but I am now the most famous man on the planet.
He didn't just say that, though. He tried to prove it with data. He literally sent Theroux a screenshot of a Google Trends graph.
Okay, for anyone who hasn't used it, Google Trends shows how frequently a specific term is searched relative to the total search volume over a period of time, so you can compare two things.
Right. So Tate sends this graph comparing their two names, and Theroux openly admits in the doc that his own line on the graph was flatlining near the bottom.
While Tate's was just this massive, towering peak.
Exactly. But the defining detail of this interaction happens when Theroux actually zooms in on the very end of the graph Tate sent him.
This part is so funny, because at the very tail end of the timeline, Theroux's search interest had spiked, and had actually just overtaken Tate's.
Yes. Theroux politely replies to point this out. And what does Tate do?
He just stops responding.
Total radio silence. And that silence is incredibly telling, according to Cataclysm's analysis.
How so?
Because it demonstrates that within this subculture, empirical truth is totally secondary to the narrative of dominance. If a data point supports the narrative of being the ultimate alpha, it gets broadcasted to millions.
Right, but if the data contradicts that narrative, they just pretend it doesn't exist.
They simply ignore it. It's also fascinating to look at the historical context of Theroux's understanding of this space. The sources note that back in 2016, Theroux actually appeared as a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh, wow. 2016, which is now widely considered one of the most powerful platforms for launching or amplifying the exact kinds of creators featured in this documentary.
Exactly. But Theroux admits in the film that back then he had absolutely no idea that podcasting would evolve into the massive engine for political and cultural shifts that it is today.
He didn't see it coming.
He didn't foresee that the fringe ideologies he spent his entire career studying were about to be mainstreamed and algorithmically delivered to millions of smartphones.
So, I mean, think about what this means for someone trying to document them today. I like to think of it like filming a wildlife documentary. But the lions have smartphones, and they are live streaming the camera person to millions of followers.
That is a perfect analogy.
It raises a really difficult question for you to consider. Is traditional observational documentary filmmaking even equipped to handle subjects who view all exposure, even negative exposure, as a victory?
Right?
If their only goal is to farm attention, doesn't showing up with a massive Netflix film crew just feed the beast?
That tension is literally the central pillar of the documentary, because to understand why they're so desperate for the cameras, you have to follow the money.
Always follow the money.
Always. And that requires examining the specific business models they employ. As Theroux bluntly states in the film, and this is a direct quote, "It's highly profitable to be a dick on the internet."
That quote really is the thesis statement for the financial engine of the Manosphere. But I really want to break down exactly how that engine works.
Let's do it.
The documentary and the critical reviews outline a very specific, formulaic blueprint. It always begins with making an incredibly controversial, often inflammatory, or straight-up misogynistic statement.
And we should explore why that specific type of statement is the starting point. It has everything to do with the architecture of social media algorithms.
Because the algorithm itself is morally neutral.
Exactly. It doesn't care if a video is educational, heartwarming, or deeply offensive. It only measures engagement, watch time, comments, shares.
And psychological studies consistently show that outrage and anger are the most potent drivers of digital engagement.
Right. When a creator makes an inflammatory statement, it triggers an immediate emotional response. People who agree will share it, and people who are furious will share it just to criticize it.
The classic quote tweet dunk.
Yep. Both actions signal to the algorithm that the content is highly engaging, causing it to be pushed to millions more feeds.
So step 1 is triggering the algorithm with outrage to go viral. Step 2 is capturing that massive wave of attention. And step 3 is the funnel.
The funnel is where the money is.
Right. You take those curious or outraged viewers and funnel them toward a paywall, converting them into paying customers for private Discord servers, trading courses, or lifestyle brands.
And this financial funnel reveals the glaring paradox at the heart of their whole philosophy, because these influencers constantly preach about escaping the matrix.
Right, they use that red pill terminology.
They tell young men that society is a rigged system designed to extract their labor and keep them subservient. They position themselves as these enlightened gurus offering the escape hatch.
But as the sources point out, their version of freedom relies entirely on a hyper-capitalist scheme of selling digital products to those exact same young men.
Let's look at a concrete example from the documentary to see how this funnel actually operates in real life. Theroux spends time with a creator named Harrison Sullivan.
Who goes by the handle HSTikiTaki online, right?
Yes. So Sullivan runs a trading platform called Finesse, which promises to teach his followers how to make massive amounts of money. Theroux decides to test the system himself.
Oh yeah, he invests £500 into Sullivan's platform just to see what happens.
And the result of that investment is highly revealing. Theroux loses the £500 almost immediately.
Just poof, gone.
Gone. Now, the YouTube video essay by Cataclysm takes a much deeper dive into the mechanics of sites like Finesse. She reviews external financial watchdog reports and points out that these platforms frequently lack any formal financial regulation.
No oversight, no official trading licenses. They're often essentially black boxes.
Exactly.
But wait, if the followers are losing their money on these unregulated platforms, like Theroux did, how is Sullivan affording the luxury lifestyle he flaunts online?
Well, because the model is structured so the house always wins. The sources detail how creators often use affiliate links or revenue-sharing agreements with these offshore, unregulated crypto or forex platforms.
So when a follower signs up through the creator's link and deposits money,
The creator takes a cut. Even if the followers' trades fail and they lose their entire investment, the creator still profits from the initial acquisition or the trading fees.
wow. So the wealth they are flaunting isn't necessarily from their genius trading strategies. It's just generated by the sheer volume of followers they funnel into the platform.
Exactly. And you have to look at the macroeconomic context to understand why this pitch is so effective right now. I mean, we are currently in the middle of a severe cost of living crisis.
Yeah, housing is completely unaffordable for many young people. Wages are stagnant, and traditional markers of adulthood just seem totally out of reach.
If you are a young man feeling totally left behind by the economy, and someone pops up on your feed standing in front of a Miami mansion saying,
Hey, the system is lying to you, but I can show you how to get rich from your phone.
that is a profoundly powerful lure.
It is. But if we analyze the logic of their pitch, the irony is just staggering. I mean, if you truly wanted to detach from societal control, to truly escape the matrix in the way they describe it, what would that actually look like?
It would look like living off the grid.
Exactly. It would mean installing solar panels, growing your own food, and minimizing your reliance on capital and digital infrastructure.
It definitely wouldn't look like spending 14 hours a day frantically optimizing TikTok algorithms, desperately trying to farm views from teenagers so you can afford the monthly lease on a Lamborghini in Miami.
Right. If your entire livelihood, your entire identity, depends on performing increasingly extreme stunts to satisfy a digital algorithm built by a massive tech corporation.
Are you really the master of the matrix?
Or are you just its most exhausted, captive employee?
That is the question. And that total dependency on generating profit through attention explains why their moral frameworks are so incredibly flexible.
Oh, the flexibility is wild.
When we move from analyzing their public business models to examining the morality they claim to uphold, we hit this massive wall of cognitive dissonance. The sources highlight a deep hypocrisy within the Manosphere, particularly regarding sex work.
Harrison Sullivan is the perfect case study for this, and Theroux really hones in on it. Out of one side of his mouth, Sullivan espouses these deeply traditional, almost puritanical views.
He states on camera that he finds platforms like OnlyFans disgusting.
He says he would literally disown his own daughter if she ever created an account. And he just casually adds he would disown a son for being gay.
Right. And he claims his mother despises misogyny and homophobia, and that she would physically slap him if she heard him speaking the way he does on his streams.
Those are his stated morals. But his actual business practices completely contradict them.
Completely.
The documentary reveals that Sullivan literally owns and manages an OnlyFans agency.
Wait, really?
Yes, he directly profits from recruiting women and managing their adult content on the very platform he claims is destroying society.
Theroux corners him on this contradiction brilliantly. He brings up another internet personality, a creator named Bonnie Blue, who creates adult content and is known for making very similar justifications.
Yeah, Theroux points out to Sullivan that Blue uses his exact logic. She acknowledges people think her work contributes to moral decay, but she doesn't care because it makes her incredibly rich.
And when Theroux draws that parallel, Sullivan completely loses his temper.
Oh, he violently rejects the comparison. He snaps at Theroux, like, don't ever compare me to Bonnie Blue.
Cataclysm's YouTube essay provides a really sharp psychological breakdown of what is actually happening in that scene. She argues that within this specific digital ecosystem, financial gain acts as a moral bleach.
Moral bleach. I like that phrase.
It's very accurate. If an action generates a profit, it is retroactively justified. It completely overrides any traditional values the creator might claim to hold.
So, to Sullivan, his motive of making money absolves him of the moral corruption he projects onto the women actually producing the content.
Exactly. He literally states in the documentary, do I disagree with it? Yes. Will I profit off it? Yes.
It's the ultimate double standard. It's like running a massive casino, standing on the casino floor, lecturing people about how gambling destroys families, but claiming you are morally superior to the addicts because you're the house collecting the money.
That's spot on.
It completely shatters their claim to authenticity. These creators constantly position themselves as the only authentic men left in a fake world. But they openly admit to staging drama, altering their personalities, and compromising their stated morals solely for clicks and revenue.
Because the persona is not an identity. It is a shield.
Yes.
And the documentary suggests that when you strip away the algorithm and the business models and look behind closed doors, you begin to see exactly why that shield was constructed in the first place.
The film transitions from dissecting their public grifts to examining the personal romantic relationships these influencers hold up as the absolute ideal.
And what Theroux finds, according to the sources, is a foundation built entirely on fragility. The documentary frames the hypermasculinity on display not as genuine confidence, but as a mask for severe, deep-seated insecurity.
Frequently stemming from childhood instability, right?
Yeah, the film touches on the difficult upbringing of Justin Waller, another prominent figure, and the fact that Harrison Sullivan was raised by a single mother.
Now, it is important to note that this specific directorial choice by Adrian Choa and Louis Theroux was heavily criticized.
Oh, definitely.
Lucy Mangan, in her review for The Guardian, took significant issue with this framing. She views the documentary's focus on their childhood trauma as what she calls excuse hunting.
Excuse hunting.
Yeah. She argues that delving into their difficult pasts feels like an attempt by the filmmakers to find a sympathetic origin story for their behavior, rather than vigorously interrogating the real-world harm their current platforms are causing.
That's a really fair critique. Regardless of where the behavior originates, the way it manifests in their romantic relationships is highly specific. They promote a concept that is often referred to in these circles as one-sided monogamy.
Yes.
It is a core tenet of their worldview. The men demand absolute, unwavering loyalty and subservience from their female partners, while the men themselves are free to sleep with whoever they want.
Let's break down the specific example of Justin Waller shown in the film, because Waller is held up within the Manosphere as this massive success story. He is wealthy, he has a partner, and he has children.
But he proudly states on camera that he refuses to do any domestic tasks.
Yeah, he will not do bath time, and he will not change diapers. He treats the raising of his own children entirely as his partner's lane.
Furthermore, he is openly non-monogamous, and his partner claims on camera that she accepts it as long as he's honest about his affairs.
But the crucial detail that the sources latch onto, the really terrifying part of this dynamic, is the structural imbalance.
Right.
Waller and his partner are not legally married. She stays at home, raises the children, adheres completely to his worldview, and as a result, she has zero legal or financial security.
None.
If he decides to leave her tomorrow, she walks away with nothing. He demands traditional 1950s-style subservience from her, but he completely refuses to provide the traditional marital security that accompanied that era.
It's all the perks with none of the responsibility. The justification they use for this dynamic leans heavily on a bastardized version of evolutionary psychology.
Right, they love bringing up biology.
They argue that because sperm is abundant and eggs are scarce, men are biologically wired to spread their seed, while women are biologically wired to seek a single provider. They claim a man's intrinsic value grants him polyamorous privileges by nature.
But Cataclysm's essay completely dismantles this biological argument.
Wait, how does she dismantle it? Because they repeat that biology line constantly.
She points out the glaring biological paradox in their logic. If men are naturally wired to be polyamorous and women are naturally wired to be monogamous, why do these men have to exert such extreme constant control to enforce it?
That is such a good point.
In the natural world, biological imperatives don't require podcasts and coercion to function. Furthermore, she points out that human females possess complex biological mating strategies of their own.
Right.
The men rely on biological determinism only when it serves them, but they violently reject applying that same biological logic to female autonomy.
And that need for control over female autonomy is vividly displayed in the documentary's interactions with Amrou Foodle, who is known online as Myron Gaines.
Gaines is the co-host of the Fresh and Fit podcast, right?
Yes, and the sources frame him as one of the most extreme voices featured. He openly claims to know what women want better than women themselves know. He states his desire for multiple wives. But there's a scene with his girlfriend, Angie, that exposes the reality behind the bravado.
What happens in the scene?
So Theroux is sitting with Gaines and Angie, asking about the dynamics of their open relationship. And Angie is visibly uncomfortable on camera while Gaines discusses his right to sleep with other women.
Oh, I remember this. But what does this self-proclaimed alpha male leader do when his partner looks unhappy?
He literally sends her away.
He tells her to go clean the house.
Yes. So she stops ruining his shot with her visible discomfort. He physically removes the dissenting reaction from the room.
That is so telling.
And the ultimate punchline to all of this posturing, which Cataclysm highlights in her video, is that Angie actually leaves him shortly after the documentary finishes filming.
Wow. Good for her. But it makes sense because if you analyze the mechanics of these relationships, they require the women to have incredibly low bars for respect.
Absolutely.
If these men were truly the flawless, highly desirable leaders they claimed to be, and their worldview was naturally attractive to high-value partners, they wouldn't have to literally silence the women around them to maintain the illusion.
The women would be speaking up to defend the philosophy themselves.
Exactly. The silencing isn't an accident. It's a structural necessity. Because their entire financial survival depends on projecting an image of total dominance, they cannot afford a single crack in the facade.
And that terrifying fragility dictates not just how they treat the women in their personal lives, but how they attempt to control reality itself. Which brings us to the war on facts and the creation of the echo chamber.
Yeah, the documentary illustrates how these influencers deliberately curate their environments. They surround themselves with a very specific type of woman, particularly in the Miami scene where many of them are based.
They seek out women who are either young and ill-equipped for rigorous intellectual debate, or who openly admit they are only participating for the financial perks and the lifestyle.
The podcast environment itself, specifically the Fresh and Fit studio, is architecturally designed for this. It is essentially a manufactured intellectual slaughterhouse.
Oh, that's a brutal way to put it, but yeah.
They bring on a panel of young women, ply them with alcohol, ask them incredibly leading or degrading questions about modern dating, and then clip the specific moments where the women stumble, get confused, or say something foolish.
And then they use these highly edited clips to make the male hosts appear intellectually superior to millions of viewers on TikTok.
Exactly. There is a moment backstage that perfectly captures this desperate need for absolute control over the narrative.
The talent coordinator scene.
Yes. So Theroux is off camera talking to the female talent coordinator, the woman whose actual job is to find and book the girls for the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
She is intelligently and calmly answering Theroux's questions about the logistics of the show.
Right.
And Myron Gaines is live on the air in the other room, but he overhears this conversation happening.
And he stops what he's doing to pull out his phone and message her ordering her to stop answering Theroux's questions.
He silences his own employee because she is stepping outside the tightly controlled, carefully edited narrative they are trying to present.
And within the safety of that tightly controlled narrative, dangerous pseudoscience is allowed to flourish without any pushback. During one of the podcast recordings, they play a clip claiming that a woman's body physically, biologically changes based on her body count.
Meaning the number of sexual partners she has had.
Yes. The clip suggests absurdities like a child will look like a woman's previous partners.
It's completely unhinged. Theroux, thankfully, drops his usual passive demeanor for a split second in that room and bluntly calls it absolute bollocks.
Good for him.
But the scariest part of that scene isn't the video itself. It's the fact that in that studio full of men, no one else bats an eye. They accept it as scientific fact.
And this rewriting of reality goes beyond biology. They attempt to rewrite history itself. The sources highlight a specific interaction on a balcony between Theroux and Justin Waller.
Oh, this part is infuriating.
Waller confidently declares to Theroux that it is an absolute fact that men built and invented everything in society. He challenges Theroux to name a single significant thing a woman has ever invented.
Using this claim as foundational proof of male intellectual superiority.
Exactly. And Theroux, in the moment, doesn't really have a list of female inventors queued up.
Who would? Just off the top of their head on a balcony.
Right. But the YouTube essayist, Cataclysm, rigorously fact-checks this assertion for the viewer, and it is a vital breakdown.
Oh, she destroys it.
She lists numerous foundational inventions created by women. Ada Lovelace creating the first computer algorithm, Stephanie Kwolek inventing Kevlar, Gertrudia Ein developing leukemia drugs.
But I want to focus on two specific examples she brings up, because they expose the exact mechanism of how this history was erased. She points to Mary Anderson, who invented the windshield wiper, and Josephine Cochrane, who invented the first commercially successful automatic dishwasher.
And the crucial context here is patent law. Cataclysm explains that Waller's worldview relies on looking at historical patent records and seeing mostly male names.
Right.
But he completely ignores the legal reality of the 18th and 19th centuries. Under the legal doctrine of coverture in the US and the UK, a married woman's legal rights and property were entirely subsumed by her husband.
So women largely could not legally hold patents in their own name.
Exactly. If a woman invented something, the patent had to be registered under her husband's name, or she had to rely on a male financial backer to hold the rights.
So Waller is looking at a history of systemic legal oppression that literally prevented women from receiving credit for their intellectual property, and he's using that as biological proof that women are incapable of inventing.
It's staggering. It is the mechanics of the echo chamber operating at full capacity. By silencing dissenting voices in the present and erasing female contributions from the past, these creators build a completely fictional reality.
And this leads to a dangerous linguistic shift. In this space, they confuse saying outrageous, easily disprovable things with being awake or truthful.
They tell their audience that to escape the matrix, they must swallow a steady diet of historical and biological misinformation.
It is a massive funhouse mirror. They build a room where the glass is curved so every reflection makes them look like absolute giants. But for the illusion to hold, they have to ensure that not a single ray of actual sunlight ever pierces the room. Because the second reality gets in, the mirror shatters.
Which brings us to a highly critical meta-conversation analyzed across our sources. Now that we understand the deeply toxic and fragile nature of the Manosphere, we have to evaluate how the media handles it.
Specifically, how did Louis Theroux handle it?
Was this documentary an effective piece of journalism, or did it inadvertently play right into their hands?
The Theroux technique. For decades, it has been a masterclass in documentary filmmaking. Theroux is famous for the pregnant pause or the silent interviewer technique.
He used it to devastating effect on figures like Jimmy Savile or the Hamiltons.
Yeah, he gives his subjects enough rope to hang themselves. He sits there, offering mild, slightly baffled reactions, and allows the silence to stretch out until the subject talks themselves into an embarrassing circle just to fill the quiet.
Historically, relying on that technique to expose hypocrisy has been brilliant. But the critical reception for this specific documentary strongly suggests it might be an outdated tool for the modern internet.
Adam White, writing for The Independent, was particularly scathing. He called the documentary a failure, arguing that Theroux's gentle observational needling is simply no match for a subculture defined by what White calls apathetic immorality.
Let's unpack that term, apathetic immorality. White is essentially saying that Theroux's technique relies on the subject feeling a sense of shame when their hypocrisy is exposed.
Right.
But pointing out hypocrisy means absolutely nothing to people who position financial gain above all other moral metrics. You can't shame someone who measures their self-worth solely by their bank account and their subscriber count.
Exactly. Shame is a social construct that requires a shared moral baseline to function. These creators have intentionally opted out of that baseline.
Lucy Mangan in The Guardian echoed this sentiment. She questioned the entire directorial focus of the film. She asked why Theroux didn't shift the camera away from the influencers and focus more on the victims.
Like, why not interview the school teachers who are dealing with teenage boys brainwashed by this rhetoric?
Right. She even suggested that deploying a female presenter, rather than Theroux, might have yielded entirely different results by breaking the implicit boys' club dynamic the influencers tried to establish with him.
And Annabelle Hoare, writing in The Conversation, raised perhaps the most dangerous possibility of all. She warned that the documentary risks acting as a 90-minute, high-budget advertisement for these creators.
Which is a terrifying thought.
By placing them on Netflix, the world's largest streaming service, without adequately dismantling their arguments or showing the real-world harm, the film might just be amplifying their profiles to a massive new audience.
We can even see this conflict playing out in the audience reactions. Looking at the IMDb reviews, viewers were deeply unsettled. One reviewer specifically pointed out the wild stares and the dilated pupils of the men on screen,
noting how they never seem to stop grinding for the camera.
It's an exhausting, manic performance to watch. But, to be fair to Theroux, there are moments where his subtle, observational jabs do land.
There's a great example of this during a scene where Theroux is working out in a gym with Harrison Sullivan. Sullivan is flexing, lifting heavy weights, talking endlessly about what it means to be a real man, and projecting this aura of total physical dominance.
And Theroux, in his classic deadpan delivery, just casually looks at Sullivan's legs and mocks his calves, telling him they need work.
It seems like a minor throwaway joke, but you can see on screen that it temporarily flusters Sullivan. It pierced his armor because it attacked the only metric he actually values in that moment, his physical aesthetics.
And while the mainstream critics were harsh on Theroux, the YouTube source, Cataclysm, actually offers a very strong defense of his methods.
Right, she points out the logistical reality of dealing with these specific subjects. If Theroux had taken the advice of the critics, if he had pushed harder, gotten combative, and aggressively called them out on their lies with facts and figures,
they would have just shut down.
Exactly. These men would have simply withdrawn their consent to be filmed. They are intensely wary of mainstream media, and as we discussed, they have things to hide, like Sullivan's unregulated trading site and his pending court cases for dangerous driving.
The documentary actually captures this fragility perfectly. When Theroux lightly presses Sullivan about his hypocritical stance on OnlyFans, Sullivan doesn't debate him. He temporarily shuts down the production.
He literally tells Theroux, call me racist, call me misogynist, call me homophobic, call me a scammer. I don't care.
He threatens to walk away. If Theroux had brought down the hammer, the documentary simply wouldn't exist.
It presents an almost impossible journalistic dilemma. When dealing with the attention economy, is the act of exposure inherently an endorsement?
We are watching a fascinating friction between a 20th century documentary style, which relies on quiet observation, and the power of societal shame, colliding with 21st century subjects who literally feel no shame as long as the viewer count continues to rise.
Does letting a man-child ramble on a balcony until he looks foolish actually dismantle his power? Or does it just hand him a massive new stage to recruit from?
To answer that, we have to look closely at who exactly is doing the recruiting and who is being recruited. We need to bring this abstract debate about algorithms and documentary ethics down to the real human level.
Because beyond the rented Miami mansions, beyond the engagement metrics, who is actually paying the price for this digital ecosystem?
The real cost. It is incredibly easy to watch this documentary, look at these influencers living in their shallow Miami bubble, and dismiss it as just an internet freak show.
But while they are entirely disconnected from reality, the content they produce is infecting the real world because their true target audience isn't other millionaires.
It's young, lost, deeply insecure men.
The sources universally acknowledge a grim underlying reality that powers this entire machine, the modern loneliness epidemic.
Now, Cataclysm's essay rightfully cautions that this term is sometimes weaponized in bad faith by these creators to discredit feminism or justify bad behavior.
Yes. Very important caveat.
However, even with that vital caveat, all the critical reviews agree that young men are genuinely struggling. They're frustrated by a rapidly shifting economy, confused by the changing dynamics of modern dating, and desperate for a roadmap.
They are struggling, and at their most vulnerable moment, they are being intercepted by fraudulent role models.
There is a deeply heartbreaking interview near the end of the documentary that strips away all the absurdity and comedy of Theroux's awkward interactions.
Yeah, he speaks one-on-one with a young fan of Justin Waller. Initially, the young man just regurgitates the Manosphere talking points. He puts up a tough front and claims he doesn't believe in depression or mental health issues.
But under Theroux's gentle questioning, the facade shatters. Within the same breath of denying depression, the young man reveals to Theroux that he was recently entirely homeless.
He admits that he sat and cried in his car every single day.
And most devastatingly, he reveals that he recently lost his own brother to suicide.
This young man has experienced profound, unimaginable trauma and depression. Yet the ideology he has purchased from these influencers forces him to deny his own lived reality.
That interaction is the devastating emotional core of the film. It proves that this isn't just internet drama. It isn't just a funny documentary about weird guys saying outrageous things on podcasts.
It is a highly efficient, predatory cycle. The documentary frames these creators as harvesters of pain. They locate struggling men, validate their anger, sell them a misogynistic worldview that guarantees they will become even more isolated and incapable of forming real relationships with women.
And then pocket their cash to buy sports cars.
The tragedy is that they offer a false cure that actively exacerbates the disease. By teaching these young men that emotional vulnerability is a fatal weakness, and that women are adversaries to be conquered rather than partners to be understood, they ensure their followers remain perpetually lonely.
And in this business model, a perpetually lonely follower is a loyal, repeat customer.
They sell a map that promises to lead to an oasis, but the map is designed to walk these young men deeper and deeper into the desert. And every single step they take funds the influencer's next luxury rental.
It is a profoundly bleak realization, but an essential one for understanding the mechanics of the modern internet and the vulnerabilities it exploits.
Let's quickly recap the extensive journey we've taken through these sources today. We started by looking at Louis Theroux's collision with a decentralized digital cult, exploring how the subjects flipped the camera to weaponize his presence.
We unpacked the massive financial grift behind the Matrix paradox, detailing how unregulated platforms funnel money from followers to creators.
We looked behind the curtain at the cognitive dissonance of their business morals and the terrifying fragility of their one-sided romantic relationships.
We examined the tightly controlled echo chambers that erase historical fact to maintain an illusion of supremacy.
We debated the journalistic effectiveness of Theroux's passive interviewing style against subjects who have abandoned shame. And finally, we looked at the devastating human cost, the predatory exploitation of vulnerable, lonely men.
It is a complex, often disturbing ecosystem, and as we conclude our analysis of these sources, I want to leave you with a lingering question that extends beyond the boundaries of this specific documentary.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the algorithms that govern our digital lives, the platforms we all use daily, are mathematically designed to reward outrage and shamelessness over truth and empathy, are these specific influencers really the disease?
Or are they just the most highly adapted, perfectly evolved symptoms of a digital ecosystem that we all participate in?
Exactly. The next time you see a wildly controversial clip cross your feed designed to make your blood boil, take a second. Ask yourself, who is actually cashing the check for your anger?
A perfect question to end on. Because as we've seen, the product isn't what they claim it is. The product is your attention. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive. Stay curious, keep questioning the mechanics of the narratives you are fed, and always look beneath the surface.